What was supposed to be a great night at a wedding turns deadly when a Maryland woman fatally stabs someone close to her after a heated argument.
Just like all siblings do, they have their spats, but rarely have I ever seen it taken this far. I mean, it's just pretty horrifying when you think about it. That this person, I mean, who does that? Where you bring a knife, you inject a knife into this equation, and you intentionally try to cut your sister.
According to authorities, they were alerted to the stabbing around 1:35 a.m. on Sunday morning. Police say they went over to a home in Cantonsville, Maryland, where they found 31-year-old Alyssa Jarrells bleeding out on the driveway of her home with injuries to her neck. Alyssa was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead about half an hour later. But while she was fighting for her life, she did clue police in on who stabbed her. As the officer asked Alyssa, who was it? She reportedly pointed and said right there, pointing her finger at her own 29-year-old sister, Brianna Jarrells. Investigators learned from a witness the Jarrell sisters visited him after the wedding they attended earlier that evening. The witness told police when the two arrived at his home around 8:30 p.m., they got into a minor argument, which continued to escalate throughout the evening. But sometime after 1 a.m., everything changed. The sisters were walking to their car. The witness told police he turned around to return to his home when all of a sudden he heard one of the sisters repeatedly say, "Oh my God." The witness said when he turned around, he saw Alyssa had collapsed to the ground and noticed the blood while Brianna Jarrells leaned against their car. After police detained Brianna Jarrells and interviewed her about the stabbing, she asked detectives if they knew her sister's status, asking if she was going to be okay. She reportedly blurted out statements about the incident without even being questioned yet. According to charging documents, Brianna said, "I know it's real. I actually used a utility knife. I never actually tried. I pinned it up to her as a warning." Stories like this one are obviously tough, but they're important to tell, and part of the reason we're able to do so is from our great sponsors like Upside. I want to take time to thank Upside for sponsoring today's Law and Crime YouTube takeover. So what's Upside? It's a free, yes-free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas and groceries. It's actual real cash back. Money appears in your Upside app that you can transfer straight into your bank account. So here's what you do. You download the Upside app, then claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. I went to 7-Eleven and got Sour Patch Kids and used the app, and it's honestly super easy. You can use the app at places like Shell, Exxon, and my personal favorite, Taco Bell. So to find out how much you could earn, download Upside or click the link in the description and use our promo code LCTakeover to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Again, that's promo code LCTakeover for an extra 25 cents back on your first gallon of gas. At the crime scene, investigators found a yellow box cutter several feet from where Alyssa was located. She said she pinned the knife against her sister as a warning because she wanted her to be quiet. When detectives attempted to interview Brianna, she declined to speak with them. But when a detective told Brianna Alyssa died from her injuries, unprompted, she replied, "OF, I thought I just nipped her," before then bursting into tears. Authorities seemingly had enough evidence to arrest and charge Brianna Jarrells. The 29-year-old was charged with first-degree murder in her sister's death. A lot to break down with this case, so joining me today is Palm Beach County District Attorney Dave Ehrenberg. Dave, always great to see you. This case is very troubling on many different levels. Alyssa Jarrells was a mother of three, stabbed to death by her own sister in a driveway after an argument. What's been your reaction to this case?
It's been shocking. You see a lot of horrible things as a prosecutor. I don't remember ever seeing two sisters going at it, and one of them intentionally grabs a knife to try to just nip the other one, just try to cut her, make her bleed a little bit, but then it goes too far. I mean, her admissions right there on the spot will surely be used against her in court.
And something that stood out to me was just the whole use of the knife in the first place. As Brianna Jarrell said to detectives, "Oh, I thought I just nipped her." We all hear again of sister or intense sibling rivalries and sibling arguments, but to hold a knife against your own sister to penetrate her skin enough for her to bleed out and die, that just takes it to another level that's just beyond.
Yeah, and it's not like these were estranged sisters. They were going out together. They were hanging out. And just like all siblings do, they have their spats, but rarely have I ever seen it taken this far. I mean, it's just pretty horrifying when you think about it. That this person, I mean, who does that? Where you bring a knife, you inject a knife into this equation, and you intentionally try to cut your sister. So, when you're a prosecutor, the defendant who admits to intentionally trying to make someone bleed assumes the risk that person's going to bleed out. If you hit the wrong artery, You don't get to claim, oh, just an accident, it's not my fault. I just meant to make her bleed and not to kill her. No, no, you're going to go down for murder, and that's why she's being charged with murder. Now, I think that if she'll take a plea, perhaps, and shows great remorse, which she already has done that, maybe she can get a lesser charge of manslaughter. But right now, this is headed towards a trial for a murder charge.
And it's never an excuse, but how much do you think that alcohol may have played a role into this heated exchange that happened in the first place?
Well, though alcohol is not an excuse for a conduct, it can be used to eliminate one of the crucial elements. So, for first degree murder, you need intent and you need premeditation. If you have a situation where they're both drunk and one of them, grabbed a knife and acted stupidly, then yeah, that could become a manslaughter case. So that's where the alcohol could come into play. But right now, without knowing more, it's hard to tell exactly what prompted this. Maybe it was alcohol fueled, but either way, it's not an excuse. She'll still face some consequences.
And are you surprised Brianna was charged with first degree murder instead of second degree murder? Or does Brianna bringing the knife prove enough that they're able to argue that it was premeditated?
First degree murder will be a little tougher to prove. You have to prove premeditation. The fact that she brought a knife into the encounter says something. It doesn't have to be premeditated over a long period of time. It could be just shortly before. And the question is, why did she bring a knife? If she can say, I brought a knife for some other reason, and then we got in a spat, and I was threatened myself, and I grabbed this knife, and I tried to defend myself, and maybe she can get away with it. But secondary murder seems like the appropriate charge here. That's an intentional homicide, and you can charge someone with murder if they're in a commission of another crime. So if there's a battery, and then as a result of the battery someone dies, you can actually then charge someone with felony murder. So there are different possibilities for prosecutors here. I do think that we need to learn more about the facts as they come out, but I would be comfortable as a prosecutor in charging this defendant with murder as well.
And going back to the statements, Brianna made a lot of statements to detectives without even being asked. She admitted to using a utility knife. She admitted to thinking that she just nipped her sister. With all of those statements, how much of that will be used against her in trial?
Oh, all of it, unless she could say that she invoked her right to a counsel or right to remain silent, and they kept asking her questions. So, based on what we know now, she blurted this stuff out. That's the best kind of confession for law enforcement and prosecutors, is when before this person is in custody, before they are even being questioned, they just blurt something out. Then there's really not a Miranda problem. So you can count on, unless there are facts here we don't know, you can count on those words coming back to haunt her in trial. She has made it much more difficult for herself to take a plea deal. She's made it much more difficult for herself to get an acquittal or a hung jury based on her words right then on the spot. That's like a truth telling device. When you start blurting things out right at the moment, boy, they have a lot of validity when you do it then.
And a couple days ago, a motion was filed for a request of a speedy trial. In your opinion, are you surprised the case is even going to trial, especially given those statements that she had made in front of detectives? And how soon could that trial get underway?
Well, it's up to prosecutors whether they want to cut a plea deal, but because of those impromptu statements, those spontaneous statements, the prosecutors may say, hey, we got enough. We're going to trial. The only thing uh, that the prosecutors would have to try to do is try to make this a murder case and not manslaughter. I could see that's her only way out here. I don't see this being a self defense case. I don't see this being any reasonable doubt. I could see this perhaps because of the alcohol, as we've discussed. Maybe the elements are not all there for murder. It could be a manslaughter case, but either way, the prosecutors seem like they're intent on moving forward with a murder case. It's up to the defendant to try to, you know, find some sort of plea deal or lesser charge because they're now invoking the speedy trial rule, which means this thing is going to go to trial sooner than later. And they are putting prosecutors on the spot to get this case tried, prepared really quickly. So it's going to be tougher for them to try to, delay and have long-term negotiations when they're saying, all right, prosecutors, we're going to make sure you're ready to try this case before we think you are. So it's a strategy that they're employing, but they may be employing that strategy straight to a murder conviction.
And given all the facts that we know right now, does Brianna, excuse me, does she have any type of defense going forward in this case?
Unless she wants to say self-defense, but we don't see those facts. I haven't seen anything that showed that her life was at risk. In fact, her statements made it seem like she didn't think she was at risk, that she was the aggressor. I think perhaps the best thing for her is just try to get a lesser of manslaughter, saying that this was a heated exchange while they're both drunk, and there was no intent to cause great damage. I mean, but the fact she said she just wanted a nip, she intentionally took out the knife and tried to cut her sister on the neck. I mean, come on. I mean, that's why she's being charged with murder. So I think at best she's looking at manslaughter, and at worst she can spend the rest of her life behind bars.
And do you think there's any possibility, say she is convicted, that parole might be an option maybe down the line?
Well, I'm not sure that parole, how much the state law where this took place, where there's parole. Like in Florida, for example, we done away with parole. There is no parole, so I don't know what the law is over there for parole if she's eligible. But this is the type of case that could end up with a parole early release if there's good behavior, if the circumstances show that she's really remorseful, and if the family members want it. I mean, the family members will be important here because they're going to give their victim impact statements at the trial, and they will say how this death affected them. And if they say that the defendant here would never have tried to harm our beloved sister, friend, daughter, then mother of three, then perhaps that could influence a judge to go lighter on the sentence. The family will play a big part in sentencing here.
That brings me to my next question. It's obviously hard and very heartbreaking that their family will never be the same after this. Alyssa is dead and her sister is behind bars for her murder. I'm sure you've spoken with a number of family members who have kind of been in that same scenario as well too. What does that do to a family and what could justice look like for their family?
These types of things destroy families. It's one of those things that we don't pay attention to. We see there was one death here, but really now you have children growing up without a mother. You have a family with a hole in it, and it's another one of the family members who committed this atrocity. So, you could say that there's more than one death here. Really, there's another death in the defendant. Her life is over, and for the family members, their lives will never be the same again. That's why we have victim witness coordinators who are used to speaking with families. They're like part psychologists because and part therapists because you can't go through the criminal justice system alone. That's why we have these folks to help walk the victims and their families through these cases.
All right, Dave, great insight. I really appreciate your time. Before we sign you off, is there anything else about the case that you would like to add?
No, it's just another horrible case, and I just hope justice is done, and in the end, the truth comes out. I think we already are most of the way there, based on the defendant's own statements, though.
All right. Again, thank you so much, Dave, for your time today. We always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Brianna Jarrells remains held behind bars in the Baltimore County Jail on no bond. She has a preliminary hearing slated for September 20th. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.